This show is supported by you, our listener. Stick around until after the news to learn some more about that. Unless you've already listened to us before, then you won't learn anything because we've said it 1,000 times.
But we will say cool things about the potential meetups, so it's still worth listening.
This is Cup of Go for Friday, March 21, 2025. Keep up to date with the important happenings in the Go community in about 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so per week. I'm Jonathan Hall.
And I'm Shai Nechmad.
Hey, Shai, how are you settling into the new life in a new country?
The table at the Airbnb has a thing that doesn't allow me to connect the microphone stand because it's just a teeny tiny, the frame is like a teeny tiny bit too wide. So I'm still recording with the earphones, even though I'm looking at the table in front of me right now and it has my like unwrapped sound card and everything is connected, but I'm missing this like 1 centimeter of like the clamp to connect everything. So I'm recording with the AirPods. Sums up my experience, I think, so far.
Okay, fair enough.
Close, but no cigar.
Yeah.
Probably in a month I'll get a lot more settled in. Looking for places right now, etc., etc. How are you settling into your new place?
Yeah, we're at week number 2, I think, at the new house. Finally have furniture in most of the house. I haven't set up my office yet. Really, I'm still on a flimsy plastic table and my laptop, but I'm getting there. Need to set up the home network and fun things like that first.
Well, if you have problems with IPv6 zones, I could, while setting up that new network, I could recommend our last episode. So we have a lot of things to talk about in this show. Jonathan, how about you take us on the road with something we already discussed in the past, the stats package. So some mathy math.
Yes. So this proposal that we talked about 3 or 4 episodes ago has been accepted. The proposal is to add a new x/exp/stats package. So this isn't the standard library; it's sort of the adjacent standard library, the experimental standard library. We're going to add a number of functions to this package for general statistical purposes. So this is going to be functions like mean, median, standard deviation. And when we talked about this on the show before, one comment we got on the Cup of Go Slack channel, when I do a mean calculation and a standard deviation calculation in some of these, I want them together. So having to do them as 2 separate functions, as the original proposal sort of implies, is maybe counterproductive because you don't want to have to loop over those values twice. You'll be happy to know that the final accepted proposal has a mean and standard deviation function that returns both while iterating over it only once.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So keep in mind, this is still experimental. So it's not going to be part of the official standard library yet, although typically these packages sort of meant to come into the standard library in the future. So it may make it the standard library in a year or 2.
And once it goes into the standard library, or even if it doesn't, do you expect like existing projects? I mean, developers who needed to run standard deviation, what have they done so far? Sounds like they've been sitting around waiting for this proposal.
Yeah, so they've just been not writing any code that needs means or standard deviations, obviously, because it was impossible. No, they were just implementing this themselves. So this is just
you would implement it yourself. I would grab like a Go Math package,
or you could do that too,
like a third party.
Yeah, the thing is that this does it with generics. Although if you use Go generics, this will make sense. It uses the tilde float 64 type rather than any numerical type. So it only works on values that are at the core float 64s. But that's still an improvement because if you have some custom type that's built on float 64, you'd have to write your own version of this function every time or do some conversion before you could call it. So this will be a slight improvement in that regard.
I'm wondering who, like, this seems relevant for web projects that aren't like math focused, but do need a tiny bit of that for, I don't know, caching or just displaying like a super simple dashboard. Because I can't imagine someone who like heavily uses, I don't know, Go num, right? Like the pure Go with some assembly math package that has floats and graphs and integrate and complex numbers and linear algebra and all that, and being like, oh, all I used out of this huge package was just the mean function, right? It might be the case. Like I might be misreading the situation, but to me, this feels like either you decide, okay, Go is a math language and let's put, Mode and Kendall and Helsinger math, whatever's, and deal with matrices as a native type, or not do it at all. So I guess the reasoning behind it is there's a lot of usages for very normal mean and variance and standard deviation, and very little usage to all that, extra mathy stuff.
I don't know that this is saying there's no usage or little usage for the other stuff, but I think my take on this is more that this is a starting point to see if we like it, if it serves a useful purpose, and then we can expand from there if it does.
I think more math in the standard library is useful as workload, like native workloads that do like heavy math stuff are more needed. There's more AI and machine learning and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like having people write papers in Go instead of Python would be better for everyone, especially the poor undergrads trying to install Python on their university machines and crying.
Oh, so sorry for those guys.
Yeah, I have a friend who, like a mathematician friend, he's like researching super advanced stuff. And he calls me, he's still in Israel time. So we have like a 24-hour, loop back until we can talk about this stuff. But he like sends me messages. I can't figure this out. Why am I wailing on these servers? I can't install Python. It's the wrong version. It can't find the packages. What's going on?
You know what would solve that if they would just rewrite Python in Go?
Ooh, rewriting in Go. That's a good idea. That's a good segue. According to Andres Heisberg from Microsoft. If I'm not mistaken, the Python guy, the Python BDFL is also at Microsoft right now. They're just having a party.
I don't know. Yeah.
I know he was there for a while. They're having a party of language designers. So the TypeScript programming language, question mark. I'm not even sure it's a programming language. It's just a type system bolted onto UI, like driver framework for browsers, which for some reason the world decided should be the number one language. If you don't do TypeScript, it's just a type system bolted onto JavaScript with a lot of features. And it's become very, very common to the point where I think if you start a new JavaScript project, unless you have a very specific need, you'll probably start it in TypeScript as well. All the major frameworks support it, et cetera, both for backend and frontend. As projects written in these languages have grown, for example, VS Code itself, which is a project by Microsoft, the TypeScript compiler. Now, compiler is a loaded term here, but I think they have decided on compiler and not transpiler just because of how many things it does. The TypeScript compiler has gotten pretty slow because it was written in TypeScript compared to native languages, which compilers tend to be written in. As projects have grown and grown, these code bases sort of gotten out of control in the amount of time it takes them to compile. And some customers have told Microsoft that they like run into limitations, memory limitations or runtime limitations, where the VS Code code base, which is 1.5 million lines of code, takes 1.5 minutes to compile, like 77 seconds. That's pretty bad. That's like a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the Go team are in the midst. They haven't finished it yet, but they already have a repo that's working and people can use it. That's called TypeScript 7, which is TypeScript written in Go. It's very much under active development, but you can try to build it and use it and even run so the TypeScript compiler has two interesting parts, the compiler and the language server, right? The thing where if you open your editor, gives you the language server protocol, which gives you all the features that you want as a developer, like go to definition and go to declaration, and hover gives you like extra type information. All these features in your editor are powered by a thing called the LSP, the language server provider, or protocol. Sorry, language server protocol. So they have an implementation of that working, and it's working very fast, but they don't have full feature parity yet. I think they're aiming towards the middle of this year to get to full feature parity. Other things they want is to get the memory footprint down, because they haven't looked at that at all. The big title is that it's 10 times faster. Compiling VS Code with the new TypeScript compiler that's written in Go takes 7 seconds instead of 77 seconds, which is, much, much better. In their mind, obviously, they're also looking forward. And Andres has lined up like things like giving AIs who are generating TypeScript code immediate feedback on whether their code is actually type safe. Because I'm working with TypeScript When you work with Go and LLMs, you almost never get things that don't like stupidly don't compile, because there aren't a lot of patterns in the language where you could take incompatible types and like jam them next to one another in the training set. I've had the experience
I
of
certainly have a Copilot telling me to use variable names that don't exist occasionally, or field names that don't exist, but it's not a problem because my editor notices immediately and I can fix it.
so you notice it immediately, but also I think the feedback is very fast, like you said.
Mhm.
So your
Yeah.
editor notices immediately, you notice it immediately. In TypeScript, it's a little more insidious. It can take
Yeah.
my editor like 2 seconds to figure it out. But they're looking even like more forward at that and saying, if I have such a fast language server, maybe I can get the language server feedback directly into the LLM. And like once it generates some
Mhm.
code, immediately give it the feedback. And if it doesn't add up, like you don't have to go through the loop of you, Jonathan, looking at the problem and then saying,
Right.
oh, now obviously they could do it just for Go development, but I think the main market is Python and TypeScript for them. So now the TypeScript is much faster. You could give it directly to the LLM as well. It's aligning with the general Microsoft vibe of AI everything. Uh, I don't know if you've used the new Copilot, which is Office, but you literally have AIs on every single button.
Yeah.
It's something's going on there. But anyway, they're working on this compiler. The editor is much faster. The server is much faster. This impacts developer experience for a very large share of developers. So I think it is a relatively big deal. And yeah, TypeScript 6 is in JavaScript and TypeScript 7 is native.
Yes, I wanted to ask about that. Isn't the current version 5 point something?
Yeah, so they're going to release 6, which is going to be compatible with 7 in terms of features, because when you port all the things to Go, some behaviors will change, like deprecation. So if you don't want to move forward at all, you can stay with TypeScript 5, and 5.9 is coming soon, and that's going to be a JavaScript-based code base. Then they're going to release version 6, which is going to include some breaking changes and deprecations to align with the native code base, with the Go code base. So if you upgrade to 6, upgrading to 7 will be very easy. If you stay with 5, upgrading to 7 will be very hard. For sure, once 7 is out and stable, you'll want to upgrade to 7 because it's 10 times faster.
So 6 will come out sooner than 7, but is expected to be equivalent, or what?
Yeah, behavior equivalent. It's just going to be written in the JavaScript and not in TypeScript. And not in Go, sorry.
So like if this were Go, where the language is defined by a spec, then 6 and 7 would be the same version number?
Exactly.
Okay.
The community response, or I guess this has been pretty big news. Like all the normal content creators like Fireship and everybody's been talking about it. One of the big question was, why Go? And immediately once you open, for example, I opened their Discord, which I don't tend to do a lot. And one of the question is, why was Go chosen over functional languages like Elixir or Haskell? There's a big post called "Why Go?" Like there's a huge discussion with tons of comments and replies, which was eventually locked. And people, some comments are like, "Oh, I was learning Rust. Oops, I guess I should learn Go." Like people are drawing really the wrong conclusions from this discussion. I think Go is what they're saying is there are multiple criteria for what we needed. Concurrency support was one of them, because they wanted to parts that were you could parallelize. They wanted to parallelize, but the most important part, they want to keep everything as compatible as possible. And because Go is a very simple language and very similar to TypeScript, it's not like extremely different, like I don't know, Clojure, right?
Yeah,
Or
right.
like Lisp based. It looks same-ish, which is, by the way, while a lot of people can start with JavaScript or Python, then rather easily move to Go, it doesn't require any fundamental rethinking. It has a garbage collector, right? You don't have to worry about memory allocation. So porting a huge code base is a lot easier from TypeScript to Go than say from TypeScript to Rust. I think that's the main claim they've had. I wonder, and you probably have an opinion about this because you get into fights with other people on LinkedIn all the time. Why is this such a touchy topic for so many people? Like, why aren't people just happy that it's 10 times faster? And they're like, no, but why didn't you use language X? Like, why didn't you use Elixir? Why didn't you use Rust?
Well, I could speculate. I think people get attached to their language. I mean, just flip it around a little bit. Suppose they had chosen, say, Rust. Would the Go community have taken that as a slight? Probably. Will they care in a year? I doubt it. It's kind of like, anytime anybody says, "Hey, I like X," if you're on Team X, then you feel good, and if you're on Team Y, you feel like, "But why don't you like Y?" Point is, at the end of the day, we're trying to be productive and run businesses. And so I just recently learned that Pandoc. You ever used Pandoc before?
Yeah, of course.
You know what language it's written in?
No.
What would you guess?
Python?
Python? No. I would have guessed C or C++ because I've been using it for years.
Oh, it's forever. Actually, it's pretty old. Yeah. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's old, right? It's written in Haskell.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, like, I don't know Haskell. I don't care. But like, I would have assumed it was something else. And I don't care what language it's in because I use it and it works. And I think it's going to be the same thing with TypeScript in a year or two. Nobody's going to remember that they chose Go over Rust, over Elixir, over whatever. It's just, it works. Fine, it's written in Go, just like Docker is. Nobody cares that Docker isn't written in Rust or whatever. I mean, they certainly aren't fighting about it in public because it works. Nobody really cares. It's a silly thing. We take it slightly some people take it slightly personally when you prefer X over Y, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. There is a video by I think it's called Fellow Engineer or Distinguished Engineer. I don't know, the title that means engineer that's better than you at Microsoft, Andres, where he goes into slightly more detail about why Go and what are the benefits, and also shows some demos. I think if you work in TypeScript, like in production, like I do, you're just like sitting around and waiting for this to get released. The moment it's going to get released, you're going to be very happy. That's it. If you're more involved, like you, for example, maintain some TypeScript libraries or maintain some compilers or just want to get involved, this is like the time to get involved in this project because it's not yet feature complete. So there are still features to develop. And I assume that there are a ton of bugs and a ton of optimizations that people could like put in. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter like, hey, I contributed this like tiny change request that improves the TypeScript compiler performance by 7 times because it finds like this specific part of the type checking, whatever. So I think right now it's very ripe for like low hanging fruits of improvements and also just features that are to be developed. And it's not like an open source project by some guy. It's like supported by Microsoft. So I'm pretty sure it is going to happen and they are going to see it through. So I'm just very hyped about this project. Like the impact on developer experience is going to be great. Obviously, people are going to use JavaScript and TypeScript instead of native languages for their projects, and it makes a lot of sense to do it in a lot of business contexts. So making the experience better there, I think it's better for everyone, other than the fact that it might allow companies to, continue to maintain their TypeScript backend slightly longer once their products have like become successful instead of investing resources into actually making them native and then actually making them fast. Small price to pay.
This won't affect runtime speed, right? Only compilation speed.
Yeah, you know what? I want to be careful. They want it to be equivalent. I think that there are going to be some breaking changes. So it's going to compile to like, slightly different code. There might be an impact on runtime performance that's unintended, or, if they found some slight improvements like they do in between compilers, but nothing like major, because at the end of the day, it's still JavaScript running on the, V8 engine. Like there's not going to be a huge difference in performance. However, I think once the compiler is in Go, it might be easier to look at other parts of that are slow, including the runtime itself, and maybe improving those. But the JavaScript runtime is so like difficult and convoluted and has a lot. It's not optimized for like performance in the same way that you and I are thinking about it. Of like, ooh, I wonder how many rows this DP could ingest. Foreshadowing. So I don't expect this to impact runtime performance too much. Definitely not negatively. Maybe, just because a lot of people are pouring through the code that comes out, and many of these people might be new to this concept because they're coming from Go and not from JavaScript. They might come up with interesting idea. You know what I mean? But this shouldn't impact runtime performance. It should be the same. Yeah, and it should come out this year. So go get involved.
Awesome. So I don't know, Shai, if you saw this story that's been getting lots of attention on Reddit. It has 1.2 thousand stars or likes or upvotes, whatever they're called on Reddit.
Yeah, I've seen it on R3DD1T. That's the site you're talking about, right? Well, if people want to see it later, they can find it on cup0go.dev, which is our site.
Right.
I got an email saying that's our site. That's our site, right?
It must be. So the whole thing is, we talked about this actually a few episodes ago, in episode 98, which incidentally was the episode before episode 100 due to an off by one error on our part.
We're gonna call that one as you know what? I think we might have missed one episode and then we rebroadcasted another one. So if you count like the pre-tax episodes, then it's 100, but post-tax it's 99.
Yeah, okay, that's a stretch, but we'll take it because we need to fix this off by one error. Anyway, the point is typo squatting, supply chain attacks, fun stuff. So there's been a whole slew of packages reported where nefarious actors have been trying to typo squat them, trying to make their fork of a project look legitimate, and then adding nasty code that runs bash scripts and stuff like that when you run it.
Just to clarify, not the code that runs not all code that runs bash scripts is nefarious. It's fine to call OS system.
Are you sure about that?
Well, I don't love it, but sometimes you need to do it. The problem is they're downloading like a ransomware that encrypts all your files under documents, which is less nice.
So, I don't know what's the moral of the story here. I guess be careful about your imports. Verify when you pull in a new package that it's the one you want and not a fake copy.
So how would you verify when you open a GitHub page? What are you looking for to see that it's not a fake one?
Well, I typically look for things like this isn't specifically to vet fake forks, but I look for a number of stars, how many issues there are, how recently the issues have been, are they getting responded to, things like that. But that's more just for like, is this a quality thing that's being updated and maintained?
So the craziest thing about this malicious fork from Ariga is that they copied the GitHub project and then faked stars.
Yeah.
Like they created a few accounts weeks ago and then filled it with stars. And now the repo is down, by the way. So good job, everybody who reported it. So you can't really take a look at it. Seems like it's been happening. The same users have been doing it for other projects too, which is very concerning. It seems like it's not just a very specific attack. I don't know. Like number of stars is easily gameable. You can just create bot accounts and create stars. So it's sort of, I don't know, it's like buying really good honey. You got to know the beekeeper. Otherwise, they might just put syrup in your thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I know the Ariga guys because they came to give a talk. They're from Tel Aviv. So I met them in person. So if I would import something from Atlas and I wouldn't see Ariga in the URL, then like something might pop off in my brain. But I don't know. Like literally got to just make sure that you're looking at the original fork. And GitHub certainly doesn't make it easy to understand if you're looking at the original fork of something or not.
Yeah. Well, and then if you don't know the company and you're just like, I need a thing that does XYZ, and here's 4 options. How do you choose one? And how do you make sure that the one you choose is legitimate and not malicious? I don't know the answer, honestly.
So there are a few good answers, right? One of them is set up Dependabot or Sneak or like any other like application security thing that scans your vulnerabilities, but that comes with its own set of problems. A, you trust them to find it, and B, they if you use, I don't know, I haven't done it in Go in a while, but doing it for front end projects, you could tear your hair out. Even you could tear out your hair, Jonathan, which I know it's very difficult, but you get so many. Yeah, you would grow it out just to tear it out because you get so many false positives. Just spend all your day chasing.
I'm doing some front end work the last few weeks, and NPM is constantly telling me about vulnerabilities with no fixes available. Like, what do I do with that?
Mm-hmm. So the reason it's telling you is because if you are representing someone who has contractual obligation to look at these things and maybe mitigate them in a different way, you could remove the library entirely or just look at the specific code and see if it's reachable or not, right?
Yeah, right.
Like it might point you to a vulnerability in a function that you're not calling. So you could say, oops, I looked at it, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very Sisyphean to worry about this stuff. And these attackers sure aren't making it easier. But it was an interesting typo squatting attack we just saw.
Yes.
And I assume they're not. I assume they're only going to get more sophisticated. But good on the Ariga guys for not just fixing their typo squatting thing, but actually doing the investigation and looking at the extra users. That was cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
One last thing on our docket for today is also a shout out for a past episode. I don't know which one that is, but the episode where we interviewed Matt Topol.
Matt, welcome to the show. Would you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for Arrow, and then we'll talk about the project.
Great to be here. As mentioned, Matt Topol. I currently work for Voltron Data, and I primarily just work on the Apache Arrow libraries in general. That's my day-to-day job now. I joined Voltron Data last year in part because
So yeah, this was episode 4 a long time ago, which is probably why I didn't remember the episode number. But I guess he's a real Cup-A-Go alumni at this point, if it's been with us for a couple of years. So there's this really, if you're into data engineering and you're like the person at your company who's in charge of, so the RocksDB has to go into Avro, has to go into Kafka, but the Kafka is multi-topic, so we have to invent a new way of logging, blah, blah, blah. If you know what I just said, you know who you are. There's a really fun blog post on the Arrow Apache blog list by Luis Alain. I hope I'm saying that right. I don't actually know what these letters mean. Why are there 2 dots above the I? What does that mean? No idea. Like umlaut. So there's a blog post about how the author had this like very convoluted data pipeline with you mentioned, Jonathan, that you like see these words and you just glaze over all the data engineering terms.
I feel like my mother watching Star Trek,
You're just not like fully getting it.
Yeah.
That's fair. There are just so many words and protocols and names, but things like Avro, Parquet, the Kafka, Arrow, it gets a bit overwhelming. Overall, the blog post is about how the author wrote a library, which is aptly named Quackfa, like quacking in Kafka.
Quackfa, okay.
Yeah, it's a really good name, which allows you to stream things from Kafka into DuckDB using generics, using protobuf, which auto-generates an Arrow schema. And the reason you'd want an Arrow schema is because the Arrow is columnar and not row-based, which is better for analytics. I would suggest actually reading the article if you're into it, because I enjoyed it very much, but I have a sense that if the sentence I just said bored you, you're not going to enjoy listening to me trying to explain it. The underlying thing is they used Go to do it, and it's faster. So, what TypeScript learned, also they learned.
So I read the article, and I was entertained by it, but I didn't understand most of it. I was entertained because it's so full of memes and jokes. Like it felt a little bit like reading the script of a stand-up routine.
Yeah.
About a topic that I've never, watching, I don't know, My Big Fat Greek Wedding as a non-Greek and not having any idea what the Greek culture references are, but still thinking it's funny.
For sure. Overall, they try to insert thing into a DB for analytics. And for analytics, you want to do columnar, which is Arrow. And because of all the Go implementation and Matt Topol's specific contributions on suggesting to use the ADBC, which is one of the things he's been working on as part of the maintainers of Go, the Go and the Arrow. It's just an API that allows you to insert tons of data into the DB really fast, which was the bottleneck for this blog poster. Like they wanted to shove as many rows into the DB they could. And it solved like other interesting data engineering problems, like the small rows problem, et cetera, et cetera. So if it sounds interesting, we recommend you read it. We're not going to go into it much more. Both of us are not super experts on data engineering. So,
every time you say data engineering, I think of Nguyen Sung.
You think of what?
He's the guy who invented data in Star Trek. If you have to explain the joke, it's not funny.
No, I don't. I'm not a Star Trek. I'm not a Trekkie. I'm just like your mom, I guess. Cool. Let's move on to a quick ad break. Welcome to our ad break. Let's do it quick this time. If you want to support the show, there's a really easy way to do it. You can give us money. We use Patreon for that. One important note, if you use Apple, don't use Apple for Patreon because the Apple takes a cut. Just use the web version. I think I went over our entire list and I haven't seen anyone doing that right now. So good on everybody. But if this is your week where like, Jonathan and Shai and all their hijinks, I have to contribute $8 a month so they can continue editing their show. Trust me, you want us to continue editing the show because the amount of bad takes left on the editing room floor is pretty big. And you want us to keep hosting the episodes so you can download them, etc., etc. You can pay us $8 a month using Patreon, and we'd really appreciate it. Thank you to all our beautiful current patrons for doing that. Yeah.
Patrons. There's the word. Yeah.
If you want to reach us, for example, find the Patreon link or our swag store link, you can go to cupago.dev. Recently, there have been some shipping issues. If you've been impacted by those, Moshe, I'm talking about you. Don't worry, we're on it. We're trying to figure it out. You can go to cupago.dev. If you want to talk to us, you can go to hashtag cup-o-go on the Gopher Slack. Or you can email us at news@cupago.dev. That is news@cupago.dev. Another way to support the show, which we really appreciate, is for you to leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Pocket Casts or just wherever you listen to this podcast right now to sort of help us climb the charts. The numbers have been very good to us recently. I think people like the show. They might have listened to, the episode with Lane and been like, oh, these guys actually know what they're talking about. And now that I'm back on, maybe the number is going to go down again. But people like the show. They seem to like the show. They seem to enjoy it. We've recently crossed 640 subscribers, which is a weird number because what do podcast subscribers even mean?
640 ought to be enough for anyone, though.
So we really appreciate all of y'all for listening. And if you can share the show with a friend or a colleague or rate us on whatever podcasting thing you're listening to, we'd really appreciate it. One final thing for this ad break is that we are planning to do some to meet you in the meet space as opposed to the virtual space. So you had in mind KubeCon, right?
Yeah. So it turns out this year KubeCon will be in Atlanta, which is just down the street from where I'm now living. So if you're coming to KubeCon and want to meet up, I don't know if I'm going to go to the conference. I haven't decided yet. It depends on what's happening in my life at that time. But I'll certainly be in the area. So we could certainly meet up in the evening sometime during KubeCon and share some beers or coffees or whatever. So if you're coming to KubeCon, give me a shout out. It's in November. There's still plenty of time to make those plans. More immediately, it sounds like you might be meeting some of our lovely listeners.
Yeah, so there's a group called San Francisco in the Gopher Slack. And since I told people about the fact that I moved to the Bay Area, Andy and Akshay have narrowed it down to the 28th of May. So I need to check if I have something there. Apparently, if not, we'll do a meetup, probably at my office, like a Go meetup. So we'll start arranging it. We might use Eventbrite. We might just do a normal thing. But if you're in the Bay Area and you want to meet up with me and Andy and Akshay and some other gophers, hopefully it's not just the three of us, we could do it. Last time we did a live meetup, it was in Amsterdam, and you couldn't make it, Jonathan, which was very unfortunate.
It was very strange too, but yes.
But we did a live episode recording. So we could definitely do that again because that was a lot of fun. But probably we'll do a more conservative, just like meetup, a couple of talks. Maybe one of the talks will be the live episode. So yeah, mark it down in your calendars tentatively and join the San Francisco channel on the Gopher Slack if that's relevant. And reach out. Like if there'll be a lot of people, maybe you could even find a sponsor and do the proper meetup thing.
Since you mentioned that, I actually looked, and there's actually an Atlanta channel on the same Slack. So I'm now a member of that. I wasn't before.
That's good. Reach out to your Go communities. You know what? If there's one action items, F the Patreon, F the Swag Store, go join your local Gopher group. And if there isn't a meetup on the calendar, start one. You can do it. You can do it the Jonathan and Shai meetup. All right. That's enough for the ad break.
Yes. Let's move on to a quick lightning round, and then we'll wrap up the show.
Lightning round. All right, my first thing for the lightning round. How are your arms?
A little tired.
Right? How would you feel about me removing support for them?
I'm not sure how I feel about that. Let me go. I don't know. I can't think of anything clever to say now.
Maybe if you just put them out the window, then we'll remove support for Windows/ARM.
That's just about as lame as what I thought of too.
I wasn't even aware that Windows can run on ARM. Although that does make sense because, every combination of every architecture, every operating system, someone has to run. There are a lot of people on this planet. Windows doesn't support 32-bit ARM anymore, as Microsoft has noted. Very Microsoft-heavy episode, this one. And, they maintain, the person who maintains the Go Windows port is saying the ARM port is really, really difficult to maintain, and they propose to totally remove it. There have been some people in the comments very nicely, like saying, "Hey, I do use it, and I would love keeping it alive." But the Go's team was like, "Hey, you're a very niche community. You keep it alive yourselves. Good luck. We're not doing it anymore."
So I have two quick things I want to talk about. They're actually closely related projects. The first one is one I've been using for several years, and I recently became the co-maintainer of it.
Ooh.
The original maintainer moved on to bigger and better things. So it's a package originally developed by Datadog, but now maintained by me and a guy in Japan, I think. It's called Go-TXDB, Go-TXDB. What it does is it lets you, if you're running tests against a database, MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, probably any database really, it starts a transaction, runs your test, and then rolls back the transaction. So that any writes you do during the test or deletes or whatever aren't persistent. Of course, that does preclude running tests that use transactions or make multiple connections, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there are some limitations, but for many, many unit tests, it can be a nice way to make your tests faster. So check that out. And then the related project, I'm going to just talk about it at the same time here before I let you talk.
And just because we're on the typo squatting episode, I really want to point out that when you say Datadog, notice the small break there, it's a hyphen. It's not actually Datadog, the analytics company, it's Data-Dog, which seems to be different. We're speculatively thinking it's related because it seems related, but it's not the official Datadog org on GitHub, which is without a dash.
Exactly.
So take that into consideration. I don't know how much malicious code you've introduced since you've become co-maintainer.
And you won't know. I'm going to keep that well hidden.
My code is obfuscated on the best days.
The other project I want to mention is actually quite related, and one I actually use more often. It solves a similar problem. It's called pgtestdb. This is under github.com/PeterLDowns/pgtestdb. It solves the exact same problem, but in a more robust way if you're using Postgres. So what it does is it runs all your migration scripts. Then it creates a new database from your Postgres database. Postgres has this nice capability to clone databases, which is almost instantaneous. That's this copy on write thing. And then run your test against that. This is better than transactions for a number of reasons. One, you can make multiple connections to the same database and without which you can't do with transactions. And it's faster. And it lets you do full support for transactions. So if you have a test that needs to run a transaction, maybe commit it, run another transaction, et cetera, you can do all that with this, and then it just throws that database away when your tests exit. So two packages I want to mention there to help make your database tests more self-contained. And I think that's all I have for today's lightning round.
Very, very cool. I basically had to re-implement this for my current stack because I guess languages that are not in Go can't have fast things. But I'm just looking at this longingly. I wish I could use it. Postgres is pretty powerful, man. All right. That's all we have for you this week. Lots of things left in the backlog for next week. Again, if you can connect us to anybody on the TypeScript migration project that's actually working on it for Microsoft, if you know anyone, we would really appreciate it. We would want to interview them. Also, if you have any interesting interviewees in general, we're both super swamped right now, which is why we can't schedule interviews. But if someone maybe in the US time zone, that would be even better, wants to come on the show, we'd really appreciate it. This episode came out a bit late, and we're moving our normal recording times to Friday as well. So I think in general, the episodes are going to come out during the weekend or maybe even start of the week starting from now. Yeah, I think that's it. Program exited. Goodbye.
Program exited. Goodbye.